They framed her, laughed in her face, and thought she was gone for good, until she walked back in as their new boss. They didn't even wait for the hallway to clear. 4 uniformed officers, ones Marisol Bennett used to mentor, stormed into her office at 10:42 a.m. on a Thursday, hands already on their cuffs like they'd been rehearsing it all morning. "Marisol Bennett," one of them said too loudly, "you're under arrest for evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and abuse of authority." No warrant, no explanation, just cold stares and a camera crew waiting outside like it was some kind of show. She didn't argue, didn't scream, didn't even ask why. She looked at them, especially Officer Brent Holden, who couldn't hide the smirk curling on his face, and stood up slowly, hands out. "Get on with it then." They walked her through the 9th District Precinct in Eugene, Oregon, like she was a criminal. Her badge was still on her hip, her gun still in its holster. Nobody said a word. The front desk sergeant turned away. A rookie she'd helped pass firearms training barely made eye contact. Everyone knew. Everyone had heard the whispers. Some had even helped spread them. She'd been on the force for 21 years. Her jacket was clean. Commendations, high-profile cases, no suspensions, no questions. And now, suddenly, she was a threat. Outside, local media circled like vultures. Marisol kept her chin up, but she could hear them. Cameras clicking. Reporters shouting questions like, "Is it true you stole narcotics from the evidence room?" And, "Are you cooperating with the investigation?" She said nothing. Just got in the cruiser. The arrest wasn't about justice. It was a message. And she understood it loud and clear. Brent Holden made sure to slide into the back seat beside her. Not protocol, but they weren't playing by the book anymore. He leaned in, close enough for her to smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You should have kept your nose out of things, Bennett," he whispered. "Now look at you." She didn't flinch. "I was never scared of the dark," she said quietly. "I just know it better than you do." He didn't reply, but the twitch in his jaw said enough. At the station she was fingerprinted, photographed, and locked in a holding cell for 6 hours. Her lawyer wasn't allowed in until hour 4. It was deliberate. Give the press enough time to publish, give the gossip enough air to catch fire. By the time her lawyer walked in, she was already headline material. "Your file's been sealed," her lawyer, Kendrick Lowe, said, dropping into the metal chair across from her. "They're saying nothing's official yet, but the whole thing stinks. Internal Affairs isn't even handling this. It came straight from the top of the district." She exhaled slowly. "You think it's Holden?" Kendrick nodded once. "Him and a few others. It's a coordinated hit. I don't know what you stepped on, but they're covering something, and they're scared you'll dig it up." She stared at the wall. Not angry, not panicked. Just quiet. She'd suspected something for a while. Files gone missing. Cases being redirected without explanation. Evidence logs edited. But when she tried to question it, she was told she was being paranoid. Now they'd made it clear. Asking questions was a risk. Being honest made her a target. And this wasn't just about her. There were victims out there. People whose cases were buried, whose rights were ignored, because the wrong names were involved. If she was going down, she wasn't going alone. 6 hours later, she was released with no formal charges. No explanation, no apology, just a file marked pending review and a whole station full of officers watching her like she was already guilty. She didn't say a word when she walked out of the precinct. But she made one call, from the parking lot. Not to her family, not to the press. To the mayor. "It's time we had that conversation," she said into the phone, "and I want everything on the table." But while Marisol quietly disappeared from the public eye, the ones who set her up started to relax, thinking they'd already won. Marisol didn't return any calls. She didn't text back. Didn't post. No sightings. No statement. It was like she vanished. And for the 9th District Precinct, that was good news. For a week, officers carried on like nothing had happened. Brent Holden was seen in the break room making jokes. Maybe she finally realized she wasn't one of us. He grinned while chewing on a powdered donut, like the whole thing had been a game. Laughter followed him. Not because it was funny, but because people were afraid not to laugh. Captain Dwight Penley, who signed off on Marisol's arrest, claimed he was just following protocol. But everyone knew he owed favors. Big ones. His sudden rise through the ranks hadn't been quiet. And Marisol? She'd been one of the few officers who wasn't afraid to ask how. Still, without her around, things got quieter. Less tension in the air. Files stopped being questioned. Decisions weren't second-guessed. Holden and his crew, the ones who had always moved like they were above reproach, became even bolder. They started clocking out early, shuffling calls to rookies. A missing report here, a botched interview there, things the public wouldn't notice, but Marisol always had. She used to keep people honest, even when it made her unpopular. Now, no one filled that role. Not even close. But while they got comfortable, rumors swirled outside the station walls. One bartender at Winston's Tavern said he'd overheard 2 city clerks talking about a quiet meeting at City Hall. Something about federal involvement. Another rumor said Marisol had been spotted in Salem, walking into the Department of Justice building. No one could confirm it, but it was enough to make some people squirm. Detective Nina Rowe, who'd worked under Marisol for 3 years, wasn't laughing with the rest. She kept her head down, ran her cases, and stayed away from office gossip. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. One afternoon, she found Holden standing at her desk, flipping through one of her case folders. "Didn't know this was your jurisdiction," he said, eyes not leaving the file. "It's not," she replied. "But the lead witness asked for me." He glanced up, slowly closing the file. "Watch yourself, Rowe. You don't want to end up like Bennett." She didn't respond, just took the file from his hand and walked away, but her stomach was in knots. That night, she pulled up her archived messages and reread the last one Marisol ever sent her, 2 days before the arrest. "If anything happens, don't trust Halden. Look deeper into the Langford case. There's more than missing drugs. Start there." The Langford case had been ruled a dead end, a suspected overdose that ended with a quiet file close. But Marisol had always questioned the timeline. The witness statements didn't line up. The evidence chain had been broken. Rowe had let it go then. Now she wasn't so sure she should have. Meanwhile, Marisol had taken up a short-term rental in Corvallis under a different name. No photos, no paper trail, just time and quiet space to work. She wasn't hiding. She was planning. A local tech firm had owed her a favor. They helped her build a database of internal affairs records, cross-referencing incidents that were quietly buried, reclassified, or erased altogether. What she found wasn't just negligence. It was a pattern. Certain names kept appearing across reports. Halden, Officer Kent Riddell, Sergeant Tom Avery, and even Captain Penley. The pattern didn't lie. Excessive force, missing evidence, witness coercion, all filed under different case numbers and shuffled through layers of bureaucracy. Dozens of victims. Some cases closed within hours of being filed. Others simply vanished. She printed every name, every date, every complaint. Then she circled the ones that overlapped. 27 of them. It wasn't about getting her badge back. Not anymore. It was about taking down a system that protected predators in uniform. But back at the precinct, they weren't just relaxing. They were preparing for their next celebration. The mayor's office sat on the 4th floor of a beige government building near the riverfront, tucked between a bail bonds office and a dental clinic. Nothing impressive, nothing flashy, but behind its frosted glass doors, something serious was brewing. Mayor Helen Trujillo had known Marisol for years. They didn't always agree, but there was mutual respect. Helen had watched Marisol clean up a drug corridor on 8th Street without firing a shot. She'd seen her de-escalate violent calls with nothing more than a calm voice and clear eyes. When Marisol called and asked for 10 minutes, Helen cleared her whole afternoon. Marisol didn't waste time. "I need a federal inquiry into the 9th District," she said, laying a folder on Helen's desk. "What I'm about to show you has been happening under your nose." Helen didn't speak for the first 5 minutes as she flipped through names, photos, documents. One report showed a young woman with bruises on her jaw, her assault complaint marked, "No follow-up needed." Another was a body cam transcript abruptly cut off mid-arrest. Marisol had tagged every questionable entry, color-coded, dated, cross-checked. "This many cases?" Helen finally asked. "Those are just the ones I could verify." "There's more." Helen rubbed her temples. "Why didn't IAA catch any of this?" "They never got the chance. Most of these never reached them. Reports were rerouted or blocked. Some officers used ghost logins. Internal Affairs was kept out of the loop by design." Helen tapped her pen on the folder. "You want to run the investigation?" "No," Marisol said. "I want full access. I want the records, the audits, the archives. Give me oversight. I'll give you clean officers and a clean department, but I want to do it from the inside." Mayor Trujillo leaned back in her chair. "You know what this means?" "Yeah, it means they're going to come for me again. But I'm not backing off this time." 3 days later, a federal liaison was assigned. The city council held a closed-door vote. And by the following week, Marisol was quietly reinstated, this time as Internal Affairs Commander, with a temporary federal mandate to oversee officer conduct in Eugene's 9th District. No press release, no press conference, just a signed document with a new badge and a new mission. Meanwhile, Holden and his crew were getting ready for their supposed court win. The charges against Marisol had been dismissed, but they didn't care about the technicalities. To them, it looked like the city had chickened out. They planned drinks for that Friday night, called it a send-off to the witch hunt. Even Captain Penley showed up in jeans and a button-down, ordering pitchers like it was a promotion party. Detective Rowe stayed home. She'd spent the entire week pulling files on the Langford case and noticed something disturbing. Officer Kent Riddell had been first on scene, but there was no body cam footage submitted. Not unusual by itself, but his camera logs showed it had been active for nearly 7 minutes, just never uploaded. She sent a request to the tech unit. Then she did something bold. She emailed Marisol. She didn't know if it would go through, but she typed it anyway. "I believe you. There's more to Langford. I can prove it. Let me help." The reply came just 20 minutes later. "Meet me Monday. Neutral ground. And come alone." The location was attached. An abandoned library on the east side, decommissioned 2 years ago. It was risky, but Rowe showed up early, hands shaking, heart racing. Marisol was already inside, pacing, papers in hand. When she turned and saw Rowe, she smiled, not like someone who was back for revenge, but someone who had finally found an ally worth trusting. They talked for nearly 2 hours. Rowe brought what she had, printouts, statements, timestamps. Marisol laid out her map of the entire corruption web. What they saw forming wasn't just misconduct. It was a cover-up going back at least 7 years. But while the two of them were piecing together the rot beneath the badge, the precinct was about to get a visitor they hadn't expected. They were still passing around donuts and making jokes when the double doors to the courtroom swung open. It was the pre-hearing for Officer Halden's testimony. A mere formality, just paperwork to confirm the case against Marisol had been dropped. Holden walked in smug, flanked by Captain Penley and 2 other officers from his clique. Rowe sat at the back of the room, silent, eyes scanning every movement. What no one expected, what no one was prepared for, was the woman who followed behind the federal liaison. Straight spine, black suit, new badge gleaming on her hip. Marisol Bennett. She didn't say a word at first. Just walked toward the judge's bench and handed over a sealed envelope. The judge skimmed the letter, adjusted his glasses, then looked over the courtroom. "Let the record reflect that as of this morning, Marisol Bennett has been officially appointed as Internal Affairs Commander under federal authority, with jurisdiction over the 9th District." Murmurs filled the room like rising steam. Captain Penley stood. "Your Honor, this wasn't shared with the department." "That's because it wasn't your call," the judge replied dryly. "The mayor and the DOJ are exercising emergency powers under Title 18. She's not here as a defendant. She's here to observe today's testimony and to begin her review of officer conduct." Penley's mouth opened, then closed. Holden went pale. Marisol turned, slow and deliberate, scanning the room until her eyes landed on the cluster of officers who had paraded her out of the precinct just weeks earlier. She stepped toward them, calm, steady. "Good morning," she said. "I look forward to working with each of you. Starting today, I oversee every internal complaint, audit, and review tied to this district. I trust everyone's paperwork is in order." No one laughed. The silence that followed was dense, like someone had sucked the air out of the room. Marisol didn't flinch. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. As the judge resumed the hearing, Holden sat stiff, barely able to answer routine questions. The smirk was gone. His voice cracked once. Rowe noticed his hands twitching slightly, as if he couldn't decide where to rest them. When the session ended, Marisol stepped into the hallway alone. Rowe followed. "You didn't warn me," Rowe said quietly. "I couldn't. Not until it was locked in." Rowe gave a tight nod. "They're going to panic. I'm counting on it," Marisol replied. "That's when people start making mistakes." Later that afternoon, back at the precinct, the mood had shifted. Officers whispered in corners. Phones were being wiped. Screens went dark when she walked past. Captain Penley called an emergency meeting. His voice trembled more than he meant it to. "This department runs on trust and discipline," he said, avoiding Marisol's eyes. "Let's remain professional and transparent during this transition." Someone in the back snorted quietly. No one asked questions. Afterward, Marisol entered her new office, previously used for filing overflow. A windowless room, 2 desks, bad lighting. She didn't care. She brought her own lamp, her own chair. Taped a quote above her desk. "If they feared doing it in front of you, they knew it was wrong." By sundown, she had her first 10 cases pulled from the archive. All marked inactive. All involving names she had already flagged. She made copies. Then she called Rowe. "Tomorrow," she said, "we start interviews." But before the day ended, one officer left the precinct early and headed straight to Holden's house with a warning. Holden stood by the window of his 2-story home in West Eugene, sipping from a chipped mug, watching headlights pass like they carried answers. He hadn't spoken much since the courtroom ambush. Not to his wife, not to his lawyer, not even to Penley. But now someone was knocking. Officer Kent Riddell, the youngest of the inner circle, stepped inside, barely shutting the door before he whispered, "She pulled the file, Brent. Langford. It's in her office now." Holden didn't move, just stared at the street. "And Rowe?" he asked. "She's helping her. They've got the old tech logs, too." Holden clenched the mug until a crack split down the side. "Damn it!" Riddell shifted, nervous. "We got to do something." "No," Holden said. "Not yet. If we press too hard, it'll look like panic. We stay calm. She wants us to sweat." But the sweat was already there, collecting on his temples, trailing behind his collar. Back at the station the next morning, Marisol arrived early. Earlier than anyone. She parked in the side lot, walked through the back entrance and past the break room where 3 officers quickly fell silent. Her presence had already altered the rhythm of the building. People weren't lounging anymore. They weren't laughing. Every step she took made someone flinch. She posted a list on the notice board. Mandatory internal interviews. Week 1, Officer Kent Riddell, Detective Sherry Ames, Lieutenant Brian Vostek. Officer Brent Holden times and dates followed. Signatures required. No excuses. By 9 a.m., the building buzzed like a wasp nest someone had poked with a stick. Nobody said her name, but she could feel it in the air. The first interview was Riddell. She brought him into the office, shut the door quietly, and offered him water. He didn't take it. "Let's talk about March 12th, 3 years ago. The Langford scene. Your body cam was active for 7 minutes. Where's the footage?" Riddell stammered. I don't know. It should have uploaded." "It didn't." Maybe it was a glitch. The tech guy, he was supposed to check those." Marisol leaned forward, folding her hands. "You've got one chance to tell the truth. Because if I find out you were part of any cover-up, that badge won't protect you. Not anymore." Rydell's eyes darted. "He was alive when I got there," he said finally, voice low. "Langford. He was breathing. I called it in, but Holden told me not to put it in the log. Said it would complicate things." "What did he mean?" "He didn't say. Just told me to keep quiet. Said the guy was a junkie and it was already over. Told me to delete the clip." Marisol didn't react. She just made a note. "Are you willing to give that statement under oath?" Rydell swallowed hard. Yes. She let him go without another word. That night, she typed up the transcript and submitted a copy to the federal liaison. It wasn't enough to make arrests yet, but it was enough to put Holden on notice. And the pressure was working. At his home, Holden was unraveling. He wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping. He'd started calling old friends, trying to secure favors, asking about loopholes, immunity, anything that could make this go away. But it was too late for that. The cracks were showing inside the precinct, too. A young patrol officer, Darnell Coates, dropped off a USB in Marisol's inbox with no note. When she opened it, it contained audio from 2 years ago, Holden threatening a witness off the record. No one had ever reported it. But now it was hers. Marisol played it on loop for nearly 10 minutes. This wasn't about gut feelings anymore. She had proof, and the pieces were falling into place faster than she expected. But as she prepared the next round of interviews, someone inside the department decided to strike back, and not with paperwork. The morning started with a smashed tail light. Marisol spotted it before sunrise, on her way out to grab coffee. The rear corner of her government-issued car had been caved in with something heavy. No note, no cameras in the back lot. Just silence. She didn't report it. Instead, she replaced the bulb herself, drove to work early again, and reviewed her next 3 interview files. Officer Holden was scheduled for Friday. She moved him up to Wednesday. She knew it was him. The broken tail light was a message. But if he wanted to intimidate her, he underestimated just how deep her resolve ran. By 9:10 a.m. her door opened and Holden stepped inside, trying hard to look casual. Polo shirt, hands in his pockets, leaning back like he had nothing to hide. "You dragged me out of my rotation for this," he said, sitting down. "You're not in rotation," Marisol replied without looking up. "You've been reassigned to administrative duties pending review. Effective yesterday," the smirk returned. Briefly. "I see. So you're on a power trip now." She slid a printed transcript across the desk. "That's a conversation between you and a witness named Olivia March, dated February 9th, 2021. It was recorded off-site. You told her to retract her statement in exchange for making a charge go away. That ring a bell?" Holden didn't touch the paper. "You really think you're going to build something out of scraps?" he asked. "You're not a cop anymore. You're a paper pusher with a chip on her shoulder." Marisol's voice didn't rise. "You don't understand what I am. You think this is about payback. You still believe you're safe because you've got people in your corner. But they're going to flip on you. It's only a matter of time. And when they do, you'll be standing alone." Holden leaned forward. "You think you're untouchable now? You forget how easy it was to bring you down the first time." She didn't blink. "That was your mistake. You left me breathing." There was a pause. Then Holden stood up and walked out, slamming the door hard enough to shake her stack of files. That evening, Rowe came into Marisol's office carrying 2 thick manila folders. "I think we've got our smoking gun," she said. She dropped the folders on the desk. One was labeled Avery. The other, Penley. Sergeant Tom Avery had signed off on 6 internal memos that contradicted dispatch logs. One memo in particular showed an arrest that never took place. Fake paperwork. And Penley? He'd authorized those logs with no follow-up. His signature was on all of them. Rowe rubbed her forehead. "They're connected. These weren't isolated incidents. They were running an internal protection loop. Certain arrests never made it to court. Certain suspects vanished. It's all here." Marisol sat back in her chair, hands steepled in front of her mouth. "How many people knew?" "At least 6. Maybe more. But I bet only 3 gave the orders. They both knew who the 3 were. Holden, Avery, Penley. And one by one, the others were starting to crumble. Rumors were flying in the locker rooms. Riddell had requested legal counsel. 2 officers had called in sick back to back. The walls were closing in, and people were scrambling for air. Marisol stayed late that night, printed copies of every cross-verified report, labeled each folder, built a timeline with Roe from the earliest confirmed incident to the most recent. At 1:17 a.m., she received a text from a blocked number. "Stop digging. You're making enemies." She turned the phone face down. Too late for warnings. But just as she prepared to escalate everything to the DOJ, something happened that threw everything off balance, a surprise nobody saw coming. It was Thursday when the call came in. A civilian had just been assaulted outside the 9th District Precinct. Marisol was already on site, reviewing archived footage in her office when Officer Rowe barged in, face pale. "It's Riddell," she said. "He's in the parking lot. He's bleeding. Says someone jumped him." Marisol didn't hesitate. She ran out with Rowe, down 2 flights of stairs, out into the rain-slicked lot. There he was, slouched against the concrete divider, lip split, eye swelling shut, a torn sleeve hanging by a thread. "He said they warned me," Riddell muttered. "Said I should have kept my mouth shut." Marisol crouched beside him, calm but firm. "Who was it?" He shook his head. "Didn't see." They wore masks. One of them had a gold bracelet, though. Same one Avery always wore. She glanced at Rowe. No words needed. By sundown, the DOJ liaison had been briefed. Assaulting a potential witness in an active federal investigation was serious enough, but doing it on department property? That tipped the scale. It triggered an automatic freeze. Access codes were suspended, badge entries logged, and the mayor, furious and cornered, greenlit a full public audit. Marisol sat across from Penley in the now sterile conference room, stacks of printed evidence between them. "These are your approvals," she said, tapping the sheets. "You vouched for fake arrests. You redirected internal memos. Either you were blind or involved." Penley tried to puff his chest, but his confidence was gone. "You have no idea what kind of pressure this department's been under. Budget cuts, community backlash. Sometimes you make choices to keep the wheels turning." "You didn't keep the wheels turning," she shot back. "You ran over people who trusted us." He folded, quietly, without much resistance. Penley agreed to step down and cooperate in exchange for leniency. A deal. Not immunity, but a door that kept him out of prison if he gave up the rest. Marisol took the statement herself. Meanwhile, Rowe compiled a list of everyone directly linked to the Langford case, including the falsified witness logs and missing footage. They worked overnight, fueled by black coffee and adrenaline. By Friday morning, they were ready. The arrest warrants came before lunch. Halden was pulled from his car in front of a sandwich shop, still chewing on a bite of pastrami, when 2 federal marshals rolled up. He barely fought back, just looked stunned, as if none of it had been real until now. Avery didn't even get that much warning. His front door was kicked in before sunrise. His wife screamed. He tried to run. Didn't get far. 6 others followed in the next 24 hours. 2 patrolmen, a lieutenant, 1 forensic clerk, all tied to the cover-up web. The news hit the evening reports like wildfire. Internal corruption scandal rocks Eugene's 9th district. They used words like betrayal and systemic failure. Pundits lined up to dissect the story. But for Marisol, none of it was about headlines. It was about standing in the hallway that Friday afternoon, watching the same precinct she was dragged out of, now surrounded by state vehicles, officers being escorted in cuffs past the lockers where they'd once stored their lies. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. But she did walk down that hall, slowly, and paused by the door to the squad room. The chatter inside went dead silent. She opened the door. "Some of you were part of this," she said, scanning the room. "Some of you weren't. But everyone here let it happen. Silence let it spread. Ignoring it made it stronger." She let the words hang. "From now on, if you lie, you're out. If you cover for someone, you're gone. If you abuse the badge, you won't walk out of here with it again. That's the new standard." Not a threat. A promise. But as order returned and justice took root, Marisol still had one final stop to make. The one person she hadn't faced yet. She waited until the end of the day. No reporters, no entourage. Just her and a folder under her arm. Marisol walked the quiet hallway of the county jail, past the vending machines and flickering fluorescent lights, until she reached the holding area. "Here to see Brent Halden," she told the deputy on duty. He gave her a long look, but didn't ask questions, just buzzed her in. Halden sat behind the thick glass, hands cuffed in front of him. He looked older already, paler. His jaw had a faint bruise from the takedown. His uniform was gone, replaced by orange scrubs and a plastic wristband. She took the seat across from him. "Didn't think you'd come," he said quietly. "I didn't come for you," she replied. "I came for the truth," he scoffed. "Truth? You think any of this makes you the hero?" "No," she said flatly. "I think it makes you the warning." He leaned forward, metal cuffs clinking. "You think I started this? You think I was the only one?" "No," she said. "But you were the one who enjoyed it the most." There was a long silence between them. "You could have kept your head down," Halden muttered. "You had the respect, the record. You would have made captain. And let people like you keep poisoning the badge?" she asked. "No thanks." He looked away. No more smug remarks, no more jokes. Just a man unraveling. Marisol stood, the folder still in her hand. She tapped it once against the glass. "This is every statement, every file, every name tied to what you did. I'm not holding it for revenge. I'm holding it to remind myself why I keep showing up. Because for every officer like you, there's a kid out there who still believes cops are supposed to protect them." Halden said nothing. She turned and walked out, never looking back. Outside, the late afternoon light cut across the pavement. It was quiet, not the kind that makes you uneasy, but the kind that meant something was finally over. Back at her office, Roe was waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a stack of new files. "You ready for round 2? She asked. Marisol took a breath. "Not yet, but I will be." They sat side by side, reviewing complaints from other precincts. New names, new stories. The work never stopped. But now, it had meaning again. She pinned a photo of Langford on her bulletin board. Underneath it, she taped a note that simply read, "Ask the questions anyway." Later that evening, she drove out past the city limits, just her and the road. She thought about the victims, those whose cases were buried, whose voices were ignored. She thought about her younger self, stepping into her first uniform, proud and ready, not knowing how heavy the silence could be. And she thought about what it meant to carry that weight with both hands and never let it break you. Because integrity isn't loud. It doesn't always win awards. It doesn't show up on the news. Sometimes it walks into a building full of enemies and still does the job. And sometimes it gets the last word. In the end, Marisol didn't come back for revenge. She came back to remind them, and herself, that justice only works if someone's brave enough to demand it. If this story hit home for you, take a second to subscribe. Stories like these matter, not just because they show what's broken, but because they remind us what's still worth fighting for.